Push! Break the line! Move!
Have you ever wondered what it really meant to survive in the Middle Ages? We think of knights and castles, but we forget that every day was a struggle, and the tools of that struggle were remarkably effective. It was an era when human ingenuity was directed not toward creation, but toward devising the most sophisticated ways to overcome defenses. The weapons of that era were not just pieces of metal. They were engineering systems designed for one purpose: to ensure that the enemy's survival would be a miracle. Watch this video to the end, and you will learn which weapon was so terrifying that its formula remained a state secret for centuries, and its use caused entire fleets to panic. What if I told you that one of the most effective and game-changing medieval devices was not a huge sword, but a small, inconspicuous piece of iron? We are talking about the garlic, a simple but ingenious device that proved that size does not always matter in war. This weapon was not created for glory, it was created for control and denial. Its power lay not in its strike, but in its ubiquitous and invisible presence on the battlefield. The design of the garlic was ingeniously simple, making it ideal for mass production. It consisted of 4 metal spikes welded or twisted together in such a way that, no matter how it fell to the ground, one spike always pointed straight up. No special training was required to use it, and no complex materials were needed to make it. Any blacksmith could produce hundreds of these devices in a short time, making them an affordable tool of defense. The main target of this seemingly modest device was the cavalry, the main striking force of the time. A heavily armed knight on horseback was a formidable force, but he was vulnerable through his horse. Garlic scattered across the field was virtually invisible in tall grass or mud. A horse stepping on such a spike at full speed was immediately incapacitated, halting the attack and turning the rider into an easy target. The psychological effect was no less important than the physical one. Imagine a knight leading an attack and seeing the front ranks of the cavalry suddenly stumble and fall, creating chaos and confusion. This sowed uncertainty and fear, causing the horsemen to slow down or stop the attack altogether. Armies that knew their enemy was using garlic were forced to move at a snail's pace, carefully examining every inch of ground. But garlic was not only effective against horses, it also posed a serious threat to infantry, especially in an era when not all soldiers had sturdy footwear. In the turmoil of battle or during a night raid, it was easy to step on such a spike. Survival on a field strewn with garlic was a real miracle, requiring incredible luck or extreme caution. Soldiers were forced to literally feel their way through, which made them vulnerable to archers. Garlic turned an open field into a maze of invisible threats. It prevented the enemy from using their main advantage, speed and maneuverability. The tactical use of garlic demonstrates that in medieval warfare, ingenuity was valued no less than brute force. This device negated the very idea of heroic combat. It prevented knights from even reaching the enemy, stopping them before they could get close. It was a weapon for controlling territory, quiet but incredibly effective.
Where did they come from?
Garlic is a perfect example of how a small detail could change the outcome of an entire battle, turning a swift attack into a slow and painful advance. Thus, garlic was not just a defensive tool, but a psychological weapon. It instilled fear of the very ground you walk on. Do you think such a simple device can be considered a weapon in the same sense as a sword? Or is it more of an engineering obstacle? Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn more about the tricks of survival in the past. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a simple piece of wood in the hands of an ordinary peasant ended the era of chivalry? The English longbow was not just a weapon, it was a military doctrine. It did not require complex mechanisms or expensive materials, but it did require the most valuable resource of all, a man's life. Its appearance on the battlefields of the 100 Years' War radically changed the balance of power in Europe. The bow itself was an impressive weapon, often exceeding a man's height. It was made mainly from yew wood, using both the hard core and the elastic sapwood. This natural combination of materials gave the bow incredible strength and elasticity, Such a bow could not simply be picked up and used by anyone. It required enormous physical strength. The secret to the effectiveness of the longbow lay not only in its design, but also in the training of the archers. In medieval England, men were required by law to practice archery every Sunday. This meant that by the time of conscription, the country had thousands of highly skilled specialists. These people had been training since childhood, developing incredible strength and accuracy. On the battlefield, English archers acted as a single mechanism. They did not aim at specific enemies, but fired arrows in swarms. An experienced archer could fire up to 10 or even 12 shots per minute. When thousands of archers did this simultaneously, a veritable rain of arrows formed in the air, from which there was no escape. The arrows used with these bows were also specialized. Long, thin bodkin-type arrowheads were used to defeat knights in armor. They did not pierce thick armor directly, but could find vulnerable spots in the joints of the armor or pierce the thinner armor of a horse. Falling from a horse at such speed often rendered a knight helpless. The battles of Crécy and Azincourt were the most striking demonstrations of the superiority of this system. The French army, consisting of the elite of the knighthood, attacked the English positions time and time again, they came under devastating fire. Knights clad in expensive armor fell before they could reach the enemy, creating piles of men and horses that hindered the next attackers. The longbow also changed the social structure of warfare. It showed that a well-trained commoner could defeat an aristocrat at a distance, despite the latter's training and equipment costing a fortune. This was the first step toward the decline of heavy knightly cavalry as the dominant force on the battlefield. The tactic of using longbows required skillful positioning. The English usually took up defensive positions on high ground, protecting the flanks of their archers with stakes driven into the ground. This prevented the enemy cavalry from flanking them and forced them to attack head-on, directly into deadly fire. It was a simple but incredibly effective defensive strategy. Have you ever wondered what level of discipline was required to stand under such a rain of arrows watching your comrades fall? But even a hail of arrows could not compare to the horror inspired by weapons that turned water into fire. In the next chapter, we will talk about a secret that emperors have guarded for centuries. What I am about to tell you was a secret for which people paid thousands, and empires were willing to do anything to keep it. Greek fire was not just a weapon, it was the guarantor of the survival of an entire civilization. For the Byzantine Empire, this mysterious combustible mixture was the trump card that allowed its fleet to dominate the Mediterranean for centuries. Its formula was the most closely guarded state secret. We still do not know the exact composition of this substance, which only adds to its mystery. We do know that it was a viscous, sticky liquid that could not be extinguished with water. On the contrary, according to some accounts, contact with water only caused the fire to burn even more intensely. This made it the ideal weapon for naval battles, where water was everywhere. Greek fire was used with special devices called siphons, which were installed on the bows of Byzantine ships. These siphons were essentially the world's first flamethrowers. They ejected a stream of burning liquid onto enemy ships, which at that time were made entirely of wood. The effect was instantaneous and devastating.
It's spreading too fast. Abandon ship.
Imagine the horror of the enemy sailors. An enemy ship is rushing towards them, spewing a stream of sticky flames from its bow. The fire instantly engulfs their own ship. The instinctive desire to extinguish the fire with water only caused the flames to spread even faster. There was no escape, even into the sea, as the fire continued to burn on the surface of the water. The effectiveness of Greek fire has been proven time and time again. According to many historians, it was this weapon that saved Constantinople during several sieges when enemy fleets tried to block the city from the sea. A few Byzantine ships armed with siphons could put to flight a fleet that outnumbered them tenfold. The Byzantines guarded this secret so zealously that it was eventually lost along with the empire itself. We know only of some of the presumed ingredients, such as oil, sulfur, and various resins. But the exact recipe and, more importantly, the technology for its safe production and use in siphons remain a mystery. This fire was a unique tactical advantage. It completely changed the rules of naval combat. Conventional tactics, such as boarding or ramming, became useless if the enemy could simply burn your ship on approach. Byzantium's enemies could neither copy this weapon nor find an effective antidote to it. The use of this weapon was strictly regulated. It could not be used against Christians, at least in the early stages. This emphasizes its status as something exceptional, almost magical. It was a weapon of last resort, used when the fate of the capital itself was at stake. Greek fire is an example of how a technological advantage, even a single one, can determine the geopolitics of an entire era. It was not just a weapon, it was a symbol of the empire's power, its invisible shield. If you are interested in this aspect of survival and how the technologies of the past ensured dominance, like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos about survival in the Middle Ages. What if I told you that everything you believed about knightly combat was not entirely true, and that the most versatile weapon of the infantry was created to counter any type of threat? The halberd is not just a spear with an axe, it is the true Swiss Army knife of the medieval battlefield. Its appearance was a response to the strengthening of armor and the variety of threats faced by ordinary infantrymen. The halberd ingeniously combined three weapons. First, it had a long, sharp spear at the end, designed for stabbing and keeping cavalry at a distance. Second, it had a broad axe blade capable of delivering powerful chopping blows and piercing armor. Third, there was often a hook or spike on the back, which was invaluable in combat against knights. It was this hook that made the halberd so effective against elite cavalry. A trained halberdier could use it to hook a knight and literally pull him off his horse. Once on the ground in his heavy armor, the knight became extremely vulnerable. The hook could also be used to catch the edge of a shield or armor, exposing the enemy to a blow. Against infantry, the blade of the axe was used. It was heavy enough to deliver devastating blows. Even if the armor was not cut through, the force of the blow could cause serious damage. In close formation, halberdiers could create a veritable wall of cutting steel that was very difficult to overcome. The long shaft gave the halberd an advantage in distance. It was something between a short sword and a long pike. This allowed the enemy to be kept at a distance while maintaining flexibility in close combat. Unlike the pike, which was almost useless in one-on-one combat, the halberd remained a formidable weapon. This weapon required serious training. Soldiers had to master all three of its functions. They had to be able to stab like a spearman, chop like a woodcutter, and use the hook with precision. Halberdiers were elite infantry units, often entrusted with guarding the banners or the commander himself. Swiss mercenaries perfected the use of the halberd in combination with pikes. They created formations where the outer rows consisted of pikemen and the inner rows of halberdiers. The pikes stopped the first charge of the cavalry, and the halberdiers came into play when the formation became mixed, striking from behind their comrades. Surviving a battle against a squad of halberdiers was a difficult task. They could adapt to any threat. If you were on horseback, they would pull you down. If you were in heavy armor, they would strike you with an axe. If you were at a distance, they would keep you at bay with a spear. It was a truly universal weapon system. The halberd remained in service for a very long time, even after the advent of firearms. It became a symbol of power and status, the ceremonial weapon of the palace guard. The Vatican Swiss Guard still uses them to this day, which speaks to the perfect balance of form and function achieved in this weapon. This weapon is a perfect example of evolution in response to a threat. As knightly armor became stronger and stronger, a weapon capable of overcoming it was needed. The halberd became that answer. Which of the halberd's three properties do you think was most important on the battlefield? But what if your enemy is not on the battlefield, but behind a high wall? In the next chapter, we will learn how machines broke stone. Medieval siege warfare was the pinnacle of engineering, and at the heart of that engineering was the trebuchet. It was not just a catapult, it was the king of siege engines, a giant mechanism powered not by twisted ropes, but by the force of gravity. Its appearance on the battlefield meant that no wall, no matter how thick, could be considered impregnable anymore. The trebuchet's principle of operation was based on the physics of counterweight. A huge box filled with tons of stones or lead was lifted up and then dropped sharply, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. This energy was transmitted through a long lever to a sling that threw the projectile over a great distance and with incredible accuracy for that time. The construction of a trebuchet was a large-scale operation in itself. These machines were too huge to be transported. The construction process itself was part of psychological warfare. The defenders on the walls could only watch in horror as this monster grew before their eyes. They knew that as soon as the machine was ready, the methodical destruction of their walls would begin. The trebuchet could hurl projectiles weighing hundreds of kilograms, several hundred meters. Each blow from such a block shook the walls to their foundations. The sound of the trebuchet at work was terrifying. The creaking of the counterweight being raised, the crash of its fall, and the whistling of the projectile flying through the air. And then, the deafening blow as the stone hit the wall and the crackling of crumbling stones. This cycle repeated itself over and over, day and night, giving the defenders no moment of rest. Trebuchets changed the very architecture of castles. Tall, slender, square towers, which were easily destroyed, were replaced by low, thick, round towers. They were designed so that projectiles would ricochet off them rather than pierce them. It was an arms race between civil engineers and demolition engineers. Projectiles were not always just stones. Although we avoid describing some methods, it is important to understand that the goal was often not only destruction, but also demoralization of the garrison. The besiegers used trebuchets to show their determination and break the will to resist. Survival during a trebuchet bombardment was a matter of pure luck. The defenders could only hide behind the walls, hoping that the masonry would hold. Each blow could be the last. It was a test of endurance not only for the stone, but also for the human spirit. The accuracy of the trebuchet was remarkable. An experienced calculation could hit the same spot on the wall over and over again. This made it possible to systematically create a breach, knocking out stone after stone until a gap large enough for an assault was formed in the wall. It was slow, methodical, and inevitable work. This machine was the pinnacle of pre-artillery siege technology. It demonstrated how a deep understanding of the laws of physics could be turned into a powerful weapon. The trebuchet proved that no fortress, no matter how strong it seemed, could withstand organized engineering. Are you ready for the shocking truth about a weapon that was considered so dishonest and inhumane that the highest spiritual authorities tried to ban it? We are talking about the crossbow. In an era when military skills were honed over years of training, the crossbow became a true equalizer. It allowed an untrained peasant to defeat a knight who had devoted his entire life to the art of war. Unlike the longbow, the crossbow did not require years of training or Herculean strength from the archer. The tensioning mechanism, whether a simple hook on the belt, a goat's foot, or a complex rack mechanism, crane, allowed even the tightest weapon to be cocked. This meant that the army could get hundreds of effective shooters in no time. The power of the crossbow lay in its mechanism. The cocked bowstring was held by a trigger, allowing the archer to aim without exerting any effort. This gave a huge advantage in accuracy. A crossbowman could sit for hours in cover, for example, on a fortress wall, keeping his weapon at the ready and waiting for the perfect moment to fire. The energy that the crossbow transferred to its projectile, a short, heavy arrow called a bolt, was enormous. The bolt tips were designed specifically to pierce armor. At close range, a bolt fired from a powerful military crossbow was capable of piercing a knight's armor. This was the main reason why it was so feared and hated. It was this effectiveness that led to attempts to ban it. In 1139, the Second Lateran Council prohibited the use of crossbows against Christians, calling it a weapon hated by God. This, however, did not stop anyone. The military advantages were too great to be abandoned for moral reasons. The weakness of the crossbow was its low rate of fire. Even a simple crossbow took several times longer to reload than a longbow took to fire. Heavy siege crossbows with a winch required up to a minute to prepare for firing. This made crossbowmen vulnerable on the open battlefield. Therefore, the tactics for using them differed. Crossbowmen were ideal for defending fortresses where they could shoot from behind cover. In field battles, they often used large shields called pavises, which were placed in front of the shooter and protected him during the long reloading process. They worked in conjunction with the infantry, who covered them. Surviving a crossbow bolt was a miracle. Even if the armor withstood the blow, the force of the impact was such that it could cause serious internal damage. For the knightly class, the crossbow was a symbol of dishonorable warfare. It negated their expensive equipment and long training, turning war from a duel of honor into cold-blooded calculation. The crossbow was an important step in the democratization of the battlefield. It showed that technology could prevail over individual skill. It was a harbinger of the coming era of firearms, which would finally equalize the rights of commoners and aristocrats on the battlefield. This machine was effective, easy to learn, and deadly. It caused a real revolution in military affairs and forced weapons engineers to look for new ways to protect themselves, which led to the further weighting of knightly armor. Do you think such weapons really broke the rules of war? But the crossbow was effective at a distance. In the next chapter, you will learn how infantry created a wall of steel that no knight could penetrate. Imagine a wall, but not made of stone, but of people and steel. A wall that moves, breathes, and bristles with needle-sharp tips. This was the pike, the weapon that restored the infantry's title as Queen of the Battlefield. The pike itself was an extremely simple weapon, a very long shaft, 3 to 6 meters long, topped with a small but sharp metal tip. The secret of the pike was not in the weapon itself, but in how it was used. Infantrymen armed with pikes lined up in dense formations, known as shieldrons in Scotland or tertius in Spain. These formations were like real hedgehogs, which were almost impossible to approach. The front rows held their pikes horizontally, while the rear rows held them at an angle, creating a multi-layered defense. The main task of this living wall was to stop what seemed unstoppable, an attack by heavy knightly cavalry. Knights on horseback were the main striking force of the Middle Ages, but even the bravest knight and the strongest horse could not break through a forest of steel tips. Attacking a formation of pikemen was suicide for the cavalry. The success of such a formation depended not on individual skill, but on collective discipline. Every soldier had to stand firm in his place. If even one faltered and ran, a breach would form in the formation, into which the enemy would immediately rush, and the entire formation would fall apart. It was a weapon that required absolute trust in one's neighbor. The psychological pressure was enormous on both sides. The horsemen saw an impenetrable wall in front of them and understood the futility of their attack. The infantrymen, on the other hand, had to overcome their primal fear of the avalanche of people and horses rushing towards them. They had to stand firm, trusting not in their own strength, but in the strength of the formation. This tactic had its weaknesses. The pike formation was very slow and unwieldy. It was strong from the front, but extremely vulnerable on the flanks and rear. If the enemy managed to get around the hedgehog, they were doomed. Therefore, the pikemen were often covered by other types of troops, such as crossbowmen or archers. When two pike formations clashed in battle, it was called a pike clash. It was a terrifying sight. The two formations literally rammed into each other, and a slow, exhausting contest of strength and endurance began. Soldiers from the rear rows pushed against those in front, trying to literally push through the enemy formation. In such a crush, weapons became almost useless, and daggers and short swords were used. Surviving in such a formation meant relying completely on one's comrades. It was a miracle of collective will. The fighter was not an individual, but part of a large mechanism. The pike restored the importance of the infantry, proving that a disciplined group of commoners could withstand the most expensive and formidable force of the time. The pike dominated the battlefields of Europe for hundreds of years. It became the basis for the armies of the modern age, which combined pikemen with musketeers. The pike protected the shooters while they reloaded, and the musketeers covered the flanks of the pikemen with fire. This was one of the first examples of successful combined combat. This long stick with a sharp end essentially changed the social and military landscape. It gave power to kings, who could recruit armies from commoners and pit them against the feudal knightly nobility. It was a simple, cheap, and incredibly effective tool for building a new Europe. The medieval arsenal included a weapon that inspired primitive terror at the mere sight of it. It was unpredictable, chaotic, and bypassed a warrior's main defense, his shield. It was the battle chain, or flail. Derived from a simple agricultural tool for threshing grain, its military counterpart was created for a completely different harvest. The design was simple but devilishly effective. It consisted of a wooden handle to which a striking weight was attached by a chain or a strong strap. This weight could be a simple metal ball, but it was often weighted with spikes or ribs to increase the damage it inflicted. There were both one-handed and two-handed versions. The main advantage of the flail was its flexibility. Unlike a sword, axe, or spear, whose trajectory could be predicted and blocked with a shield, the flail was unpredictable. The striking weight on the chain could easily swing over the edge of the shield and hit a warrior who was confident in his defense. This made fighting a warrior armed with a chain extremely difficult. The force of the blow that a chain could deliver was enormous. All the energy invested in swinging it was concentrated in the small point of the striking weight. Even against a well-armored opponent, such a blow was effective. It might not pierce the armor, but the force of the blunt blow was transmitted through the metal, causing severe damage and shock. The psychological effect of the battle chain was enormous. The whistling sound of the spinning weight and the unpredictability of its attacks were unnerving. The enemy was forced to remain constantly tense, trying to guess where the next blow would come from. This exhausted him and caused him to make mistakes. Surviving a battle with such a weapon required not only skill, but also luck. The only reliable defense was to not give the enemy room to maneuver. It was necessary to close the distance, to enter the dead zone, where the chain became useless and even dangerous for its owner. But doing this against a spinning spike ball was an extremely risky task. Combat chains are often associated with various peasant uprisings and militias. This is logical, given their agricultural origins. However, there were also specialized military models that were used by professional soldiers. They valued this weapon for its unique properties. In some variants known as Morgenstern or Morning Star, a short rod connecting the handle and the spiked ball was used instead of a chain. It was a more controllable but no less formidable weapon, combining the power of a mace with the unpredictability of a flail. The combat chain is a striking example of how medieval weaponsmiths sought ways to circumvent defenses. In the eternal struggle between armor and projectiles, the chain was an asymmetrical response. It proved that sometimes victory does not require a direct trajectory, but rather flexibility and the ability to strike where it is least expected. When people are stripped of everything, they begin to use what they have to fight. The battle scythe is one of the most formidable symbols of popular anger and despair. By taking a simple agricultural tool and modifying it slightly, peasant militias obtained a weapon capable of striking terror into even professional soldiers. An ordinary scythe designed for mowing grass was inconvenient in battle. Its blade was angled to the shaft, which made it effective for cutting movements at ground level, but not for combat. The battle scythe, on the other hand, was modified. The long, curved blade was reforged so that it continued the line of the handle, essentially turning it into a giant sword on a stick. Sometimes the blade was simply welded or screwed vertically to the shaft, turning the scythe into a kind of halberd. It was cheap, quick, and did not require any special weaponry skills from the blacksmith. Any village craftsman could turn dozens of scythes into deadly weapons in a single day. This made it possible to arm an entire army in the shortest possible time. Even in the hands of an untrained person, a battle scythe was dangerous. Its long shaft allowed the enemy to be kept at a distance, and its wide blade could deliver terrible chopping and cutting blows. A detachment of peasants armed with such weapons was a chaotic but formidable force. The psychological effect was enormous. Professional soldiers and knights were used to fighting against people like themselves. Encountering a crowd of angry people wielding huge blades on the battlefield was a test of nerves. It was a war without rules, a riot where pitchforks and axes were used. Of course, against heavy armor and disciplined formations, such a militia was ineffective. A battle scythe could not pierce armor, and its owner lacked the training to act in formation. But that was not its purpose. Its purpose was to frighten, overwhelm with numbers, and sow chaos. Surviving a clash with such a weapon of desperation was not easy, even for a professional. While a knight was focused on one opponent, he could be attacked by several people from different sides at once. The long blades of scythes were especially dangerous for horses, turning riders into infantrymen. The battle scythe became a symbol of many peasant wars and uprisings throughout Europe. It demonstrated that the will for freedom could turn even the most peaceful tool into a weapon. It was the response of the oppressed who had nothing but their tools and their fury. This weapon was not the pinnacle of engineering. It was the pinnacle of human ingenuity when cornered. It showed that the line between a tool for harvesting crops and a tool for waging war is very thin. It all depended on whose hands it was in and what its purpose was. The use of such improvised weapons forced the authorities to look at the common people differently. They were no longer just a silent mass. Under certain circumstances, this mass could turn into a formidable force, armed with their everyday tools. The history of the combat scythe is a story of how despair breeds resistance. This weapon did not bring victory in major wars, but it gave thousands of people the opportunity to fight for their lives and their rights using the only thing they had. In medieval warfare, a castle was not just a fortified building, it was the main stronghold, the heart of the defense, and its walls were the main argument for protecting the territory. The castle was a symbol of strength and impregnability, and its walls served as a shield that could protect the inhabitants from external threats. However, in order to break this shield and take the castle by force, it was necessary to find a way to breach these walls, which meant that a powerful counter-argument was needed. This was the siege tower, or tower. It was not just a weapon. It was a multi-story mobile fortification, the pinnacle of siege engineering, created for one sole purpose: to deliver the assault force to the very top of the enemy wall, bypassing all obstacles and defenses. The siege tower was the crowning glory of the siege camp and one of the most ambitious and complex projects of its time. It was a huge wooden structure, often as tall as the wall it was meant to storm, or even taller. It was built right at the siege site, just like a trebuchet, and the process was long, difficult, and required enormous effort and resources. The craftsmen and workers involved in the construction had to ensure precision and reliability in every element of the structure, because the entire operation depended on it. The construction process was not only laborious, but also dangerous, because the besieging army could attack the tower while it was still being built. When the tower was ready, it was mounted on wheels or rollers, allowing it to be pushed slowly but surely towards the wall. This was the most dangerous moment in the use of a siege tower, because when the tower was being moved, it became vulnerable to enemy attacks. The structure had to be pushed either by soldiers standing inside the tower or by workers located outside, and they became the main target for archers, crossbowmen, and other defenders positioned on the castle walls. To protect these people, the tower was covered with raw animal skins or metal sheets, which were supposed to protect it from flaming arrows and crossbow bolts that could pierce the structure and set it on fire. The castle's defenders did everything they could to stop this monster. They dug moats, drove stakes into the ground, tried to set the tower on fire with flaming arrows, and used their catapults to destroy or damage it. However, the greatest attention was paid to preventing the tower from getting too close to the wall. The slow, inevitable approach of the siege tower to the castle wall was not only a physical process, but also a real duel between engineers and willpower, in which each step brought either victory or disaster closer. Inside the tower, the atmosphere was tense. The tower had many rooms and levels, and assault troops climbed narrow staircases to different floors, ready to attack at any moment. Each floor had its own purpose. The lower tiers could house battering rams or other siege engines, which were used to try to break through the castle gates at the same time as the attack on the walls. The middle and upper levels of the tower could house archers and crossbowmen who fired at the defenders, allowing them to cover the actions of the assault troops and give them a chance to break through. The top tier of the tower was usually occupied by the best fighters, specially selected to be the first to climb the wall and capture the foothold. These were the most experienced soldiers, ready to face any danger, because they knew that their task was not just to climb the wall, but also to ensure that their unit could advance further. Inside the tower, it was dark and stuffy from the presence of dozens of people. and every creak of the structure echoed in the hearts of the soldiers, because this was the moment when any turn of events could be expected. The assault culminated when the siege tower finally reached the wall. At that moment, the process of installing a special bridge or ladder began on the upper tier, which was thrown over the wall, connecting the tower to the fortress. And so, across this narrow bridge, under a hail of arrows, stones, and boiling tar, the assault squad had to break through the wall and capture a foothold. This was one of the most dangerous moments in the entire war, because there were deadly threats on both sides, and victory depended on the bravery of the soldiers, the speed of their actions, and their determination. The success of the entire operation depended on how quickly reinforcements could arrive and how quickly the attackers could secure their position on the wall and begin to move through the fortress. The siege tower was a complex weapon system, and its design provided not only assault capabilities, but also support for other types of attacks. Its lower levels could house battering rams designed to break through gates, while its upper floors could hold soldiers who defended it and suppress defenders with arrows and bolts. This weapon was all or nothing. It took weeks and sometimes months, as well as enormous resources, to build such a tower. If the defenders managed to destroy or burn the tower before it reached the wall, it was a huge blow to the morale of the besiegers. But if the tower reached its goal, the fate of the castle was almost sealed. The siege tower was not just part of the siege. It was a symbol of the tenacity and engineering power of the Middle Ages. It was proof that there was no wall that could not be climbed if you had enough resources, time, and ingenuity. It was a weapon that turned static defense into a dynamic, brutal battle in which every move and every moment was decisive. It was the culmination of the siege, the moment of truth when all efforts, all strategies, and all military might collided in one brutal and inevitable test. We have looked at just 10 examples of how medieval ingenuity was directed toward overcoming defenses. From simple garlic that made the ground hostile to giant siege towers that stormed the heavens, each of these devices was a response to the challenges of its time. They show that survival in that era was not simply a matter of luck, but the result of a complex interplay of tactics, engineering, and psychology. These tools and methods of warfare shaped the world we know. They changed the borders of empires, overthrew dynasties, and forced entire societies to evolve. By studying them, we study not just pieces of metal and wood, but the very nature of human conflict and the incredible will to survive that drove people to perform miracles of ingenuity amid chaos. What other aspects of survival in the Middle Ages or other historical periods would you like us to explore? Perhaps you are interested in medicine, construction, or everyday life. Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the past.
Aye, the finest weave we've done all month.